Alright, hello everybody, I'm the Super27 and welcome to another Dokkan battle video. Now I wanted to do a discussion today, because I don't truly think global players, or really even the JP players, were truly ready for this fight, or even still are truly ready for this fight. Like, this fight is just poorly designed through and through. The units we have aren't really up to stuff for a fight like this, and that's not to like shame our units or anything. It's to dog water on this fight. This fight is fundamentally flawed. It is so bad. So let's go ahead and quickly just talk about why I feel this way. So, it is a 4-phased fight. This is the final fight in the Supreme Magnificent Spectacle Universal Survival Saga Edition. Now, JP players, they have had access to this for roughly around a month. Give or take, some change or whatever, about a month. Whereas us global players, we should be seeing it in a week. My guess would be the 21st. That would be kind of when I think it's going to happen, because I'm still expecting Jiren to drop very, very soon, next week, and then after that, like, this kind of would coincide with his release in the game. So, it is a 4-phase fight. Starts off very easy, probably piddly easy, if you would ask some people. 30 million HP is really nothing to, like, sneeze at. Like, that's kind of pathetic, IMO. 400 damage on the normals, which, again, is pathetic. That's, like, what Fusion Zamasu was doing last year. We've moved so far ahead of that. We have characters who can do 1 million normals, some of which we'll actually see a little bit later on. Their defense, again, is nothing really, of note worth. And then they have, like, very minimal damage reduction. Like, 64% isn't, like, the most that we've ever seen, I guess. Yeah, really nothing special. And then if we're looking here on their super attack effect, they debuff, which, I mean, can be annoying, but it's really not that bad. And then it's a 1.12. So, overall, like, their base form seems quite weak. That, they can super pretty soon. They can only super once per turn, but they have a very moderately short to cooldown. They don't do too many attacks on a turn. They do 6 attacks on a turn, as we can see here. So they are pretty much guaranteed to super at least once in your turn. And you're not able to debuff them by, like, stunning or sealing. You can offensively and defensive... you can offensively... No, defensive. You can defensively debuff them, which is like, okay. Also, this is interesting. Deals damage at the start of turn. So this is like the ability of that one Super Boo Red Zone, where at the start of each turn, you're going to take a little bit of damage, so you can't enter an attacking turn at full HP. This is actually relatively significant, because most of the most relevant teams, they're averaging between 700,000 and 800,000, so this is potentially a 7th or an 8th of your health bar at the start of each turn, which could potentially be why they have the much lower stats, but, like, no modern character... I mean, characters even from last year probably aren't taking damage against this. Which, like, it's nothing special. They do also get stats for the first couple of turns. They get an extra 10% attack and 10% defense each turn. That doesn't matter. You're just speed blitzing this first form. So, very weak, but we go into 17, alright? So you go through this super quick phase, like, no HP, very minimal defense, very minimal damage reduction. You'll 1 to 2 turn this every turn, even if you're not bringing a very offensive team. It'll be rare for you to be on turn 3 against this unit. If you're going up against turn 3, you're doing something wrong. Like, even a non-rainbowed box should be able to do this with moderate units, like, decently, like, modern releases or whatever. Then we get to 17. So 17 has double the HP, slightly higher normals. Again, defense is slightly higher, damage reduction is slightly higher. 7 attacks on a turn, the cooldown is 7, so again, basically guaranteed to super every single turn. 1.68 million on the super attack, so now we're kind of getting into some more modern numbers. But this is really annoying right here. Super attack effect, guaranteed to stun, seeing as he does 7 attacks in a turn, and his cooldown is 7, meaning if he supers in slot 1, he's almost always going to super in slot 1. If he supers in slot 3, it'll kind of be the same thing. I mean, if he supers before you get to super, like, that's just annoying. That's not difficult, that's annoying. Especially when you have a unit like Beast Gohan, or, like, a dedicated slot 1 unit like Topo or whoever, and you never really get to see them pop off because they get stuck with this. It's just annoying. Again, once we get into this form, you cannot debuff him in any way, shape, or form. You can't stun him, you can't seal him. He has the same ability where each turn he gets an extra 10% attack and defense up to 50%. Which probably shouldn't be too relevant. Again, you should be able to, by this point in the fight, have a couple stacks with some characters, have some characters be built up. Again, I would say 1 to 3 turns on average, you should be beating this guy. 1 to 3 turns, I feel like, is a pretty gracious whatever. But here's where he gets annoying. He has this right here. He has a 100% chance to lock, which in of itself is just a toxic mechanic, outright destroying your rotations. You can have a slot 3 unit stuck in slot 1. You would have a unit who gets stats on super attack. Roshi is one who comes to mind. Roshi at the start of turn only has 150 stats. He gets an extra 150 on his super attack effect. So if you floated Roshi and he pops back up, he gets locked in slot 1, you're dead. And that's just a problem with the character's kit. Or he's just not designed for a fight like this, which is just annoying, but that's fine, that's whatever. He has 2 annoying mechanics right here, but that's not the biggest deal. We've seen bosses which do way worse than just lock and seal. I mean, we even had, during the 7th anniversary, we had the Omega Shinron event, where guaranteed for that first phase, he was locking and sealing 1 unit guaranteed. Bojack, Red Zone Bojack, he does the same thing in the Red Zone movie Boss Rush. Each turn, he's guaranteed to stun and seal someone at the start of the turn, whereas he's the guaranteed to lock right here. This unit, he has to hit you with the super, so as long as it's not in slot 1, it won't really affect you, but potentially, again, your slot 1 unit can just get bullied and never get a chance to do anything, which sucks. But okay, that's whatever. This phase, in of itself, again, not super impressive super attack damage. I mean, it's definitely up there, but we've seen way worse. Normals aren't anything special, relatively low HP and everything. Then we move on to Golden Frieza in 17, and this is where the real poor design of the fight really starts to like shine its ugly little head. So we now have 100 million HP, basically 1 million normals, 500k defense, and 68% damage reduction. They do 9 attacks on a turn, and the cooldown is 9, so again, basically guaranteed to super every turn. Now, there is an instance where you can enter a turn, they don't attack, they're going to super in slot 1 on the next turn, just to let you know. Or they super in slot 3. Generally, on the next turn, you won't have to worry about a super attack. It depends on where they super in slot 3. So there are some instances where this unit won't actually super attack for a rotation, but the super attack really isn't what this character is scary for. Now, granted, they do have a very scary super attack, 2.76. So again, you could be on this, like, again, you can 1-turn this. Let's be generous, say you 2-turn this. You could be on this on turn 4. So think of how many units don't get built up that fast. This is a little scary, not gonna lie. But if we're looking here, this is where things get way worse. So you cannot stun them, you cannot seal them, you cannot debuff them. They randomly change orbs. They get 10% attack and defense up to 100%, so these guys can actually, you know, have a higher threshold than 50%. And seeing as these guys are significantly tankier, and on the turn prior, your opening rotations are going to be screwed up. You could potentially have just whack rotations, characters who aren't linking well together. You could have slot 3. You could have 2 slot 3 units on the same rotation. You could have your friend leader or your slot 1 unit not even be on the rotation. Just a lot of like weird shenanigans. So you could potentially be stuck in this phase for a long time because of this really ugly combo. But it's okay, whatever. We can deal with that. Or we would be able to if it didn't have this ability right here. Nullifies, dodge, and ensures hits. So this is why Tech MUI is essentially guaranteed to be needed on an event like this. Or not needed, but you are going to struggle 100 times more if you do not have Tech MUI as opposed to if you do. Because you could have the domain activated by this time. Or can you? Because again, you get speed blitz these. This is again why I think it's a little bit poorly designed. These two phases have such low HP, they have such low defense, that you could just get to this guy before you could even have access to the domain, because his domain is turn 5 from his first appearance, not just turn 5. Even if it was turn 5, I've seen some people actually one phase 17. I've seen people get here on turn 3. Now, I don't know if that's private server shenanigans or if they were using items or what have you, but you can get to this guy very quickly, being very unprepared, and now you just have a rotation full of dodging units who can't do anything. Why does he have this toxic mechanic on top of this toxic mechanic? And he can also orb change. This is another toxic mechanic right here. It's just full of these like things that are out of the player's control, and having more than one of these in the same fight is bad, in my opinion. But okay, whatever. It's whatever. You're able to have Tech MUI, or you have no dodging units on your team. You just have a bunch of units who can raw dog a super or whatever. Like maybe Topo's team, for example, or like God Topo, who could just eat this or whatever. Let's assume that. Let's assume that it takes you 3 turns or 4 turns to get to this guy. You're now into the final stage. Yet another just BS fight. 100 million HP, basically 1 million normals, way higher defense. If we're looking here, this was 500,000. This is 2 million for the defense. A huge, staggering jump in like just defensive. So like, if you were struggling to beat this guy, it's going to be way worse here. and then 65% damage reduction. They have a pretty powerful super attack effect right here. Again, they are just debuffing you, so you may be wondering why am I saying that's devastating when I said earlier that a debuff wasn't the biggest deal. We'll get to that in just a minute. Again, this is essentially a 3 million. It's 2.85, so basically, they have a 0 cooldown, so they can bully slot 1. This basically saying, hey, we're going to super slot 1 every single turn, dickhead. There's nothing you can do about it. Okay, but at least they're not stunning or sealing or anything on their super attack effect, so your slot 1 unit can potentially still do something, or at least that would be the case if it weren't for this. Reduce damage below a certain level to 0. So, I've seen this around, and from what I can gather, unless you are a type advantage character, your attack stat, you know, when you're doing the animation, how there's a little circle with the character icon and it shows you the stat, it has to be 15.5 million with a crit to do damage to these guys because of how high their defense is and their damage reduction. So essentially, what it boils down to is if you have to do a 10th. 1/10 of this character's health bar per attack, otherwise you're doing 0. So how many teams just get completely invalidated by this one ability right here, which gets exemplified by this? You could have your slot 1 unit could generally be your most powerful unit, and they are no longer able to do anything. Beast. I've seen Beast do 0 damage. I've seen Tech MUI do 0 damage. This is kind of insane. It's just a really toxic combination. But, okay, let's look at it here. You can't stun him, you can't seal him, you can't debuff him, whatever. Then he gets this. Alright, so when he's above... or when he's below 50% HP, his attack stat doubles. But to compensate with that, his defense gets cut in half, okay? So you may be thinking, oh, well, it gets easier to cross the threshold. That is true. That is true. Once you get him below 50% HP, it's a lot easier to move quickly through the fight. However, with this ability up, his normal attacks right here are basically 2 million, okay? Basically 2 million. So his normals will be hitting harder than this unit's super, just for reference. And then this right here, this essentially becomes like 5.6, give or take a little bit more than that, but a 5.6 million super. And this is pretty deep into a fight. So again, let's say best case scenario, 1 phase, 2 turns, 3 turns. Turn 7, let's say it takes you a turn to get him below that threshold. Turn 8, you know what unit's passive is still open on turn 8? None of them. Beast Gohan loses access to his intro. SSJ Angel Goku, he loses his. Cell Max, his is long gone. Broly, Gogeta, they're long gone. All these characters who have these really powerful dynamic abilities, which work well for early stages of the fight, they're gone. You don't have access to them anymore. So what are you going to do to eat this? I mean, yeah, you have the Beast active, you know, you could have these other workaround abilities. You could have the Gogeta target all mechanic on his active skill where you can just completely ignore this or whatever. But most units, most good units, they're not eating this. They're not eating this when this is up. And like, it's just one thing after another. And this is, again, goes into why I think this fight is just poorly designed. If anything, this first phase is fine. Up the offense, or not the offense, up the HP. Make it so that we don't get to this guy on turn 2 or turn 3. Make it so that our opening rotations don't matter so much. But then it's like, oh, well, my opening rotations probably don't matter anyway, because there's a guaranteed lock. I'm going to have to work around how am I going to move my characters when I don't have a fundamental ability to move one of them. This game, you could say it's RNG, but a lot of it comes down to skill. Knowing how to maneuver your characters, knowing what your character can and cannot do, what they can and cannot take, expect how much damage they're going to deal, all these certain things. This outright just takes away an ability that you, the player, have to counter this fight. And if that wasn't bad enough, some of your units might not be able to get stacks off if they bully slot 1. And if he supers before you get to attack, he's going to do that pretty much every turn until you kill him. Now, again, there is a chance he'll super in slot 3, and you won't have to worry about something like this. But he can just, like, this is just nasty. He can just outright devastate rotations, locking units who have to go in slot 1 out of slot 1, locking floating units into slot 1. Just real nasty stuff like that. And then it just gets simplified by this, where, like, dodge nullifying. If you're bringing dodge units, you better not unless you have Tech MUI in your team, or unless you plan to beat this guy in 1 turn, which I promise you, you cannot do. You will not be able to get rid of this guy in just 1 phase. Even if you had the most devastating active skill turn in the world, the only way you could maybe do that is if he had a billion attacks in slot 1, you're able to transform into Tech MUI, you get a bunch of counters off, he gets like a double super, you activate SSBE and AGL MUI's active skill within the same turn, and then they have their guaranteed crits. That is maybe literally the only feasible way I could see you doing this no item, unless you brought in like, the limo item and you brought Cell Max and you just blitzed him with Cell Max. I could see you potentially doing that. Cell Max with like Broly on the same rotation, something along those lines. That would really be the only way you're doing that. But again, you're going into this fight needing Tech MUI when potentially your Tech MUI could get locked on your rotation. So he could be on his next turn, would be his turn 5. Oops, he gets locked into slot 3. Now you're on this, and the unit who would have his domain activated is no longer on your main rotation. Now you're in a fight where you absolutely need him. This unit is getting stronger every turn. There's a 70% chance that he will completely ruin your orbs. There's nothing you can do as a player to debuff him. There's nothing you can do to really try to fix your rotations, because this is relatively deep into a fight. He has, like, this is the amount of HP that this guy needed. Or buff this guy's HP. Do something other than just have 2 phases that you can outright blitz, and then you're into, like, the bone zone. And then it gets worse. And then it gets worse. Think about how many units are completely invalidated by this or by this. The entire Majin Power team. They were struggling against Beast Gohan when you needed to just do 4 million damage. This guy's threshold is over 3 times as high. They're complete fraud. So let's look at units just from this year of who can realistically beat that damage threshold. Again, I'm looking on the global side of things, so we'll be missing a few characters. Cell Max and Jiren and Roshi, notably. But let's go ahead and just really quickly analyze who can realistically beat the damage threshold. So this is going to be the start of the year, roughly. So we're going to go click one at a time. Kefla with enough stacks, she could definitely do it. But like this unit is not. Let's see here. This unit isn't. I don't know why you would run him. Dragon Fist and Hirudegarn, they cannot cross the threshold. Angel SHA 3. I think this is a very overrated unit. He's not touching them. Vegito, he's not touching them. Gotenks isn't touching him unless you get like a triple super turn, which is possible, I suppose. Boo is completely invalidated by this fight, and so is the rest of his team. The rest of his team is completely invalidated because this is a defensive unit on a very defensive team. Even this guy with a bunch of stacks, not touching him. Not touching him. This is a unit who, even if they had a billion stacks, probably would not be able to touch him. Let's see here. This is not a unit who's going to be able to touch him. Kid Boo's not doing anything. Frieza can. But, like, Frieza is bad, so you're not going to be bringing Frieza in there. But Frieza could certainly, like, cross that damage threshold. If you were able to give this guy, like, a nuclear amount of orbs, I could see him potentially doing damage, even though he would be type disadvantage, because this is an STR phase here at the end. I do just think with how high his attack stat can potentially be, once he gets all his hits, he has his crit chance, he has all that extra offense, and you give him a bunch of orbs, he could certainly do it. Gotenks, I don't think could, but Gotenks could potentially be a unit who could cross that damage threshold. But, like, this unit, very rarely have I seen them actually be able to do damage outside of, like, I don't know, even with guaranteed crits, because they are going in with type disadvantage or whatever. Because this is a very defensively oriented unit, primarily having dodge and launching a bunch of additionals, which do little damage as their primary mechanic. Broly is probably the first unit who I can comfortably say, yes, Broly can cross that damage threshold. I guess Frieza was too. So Frieza and Broly can both confidently cross that damage threshold. But let's see here. Broly, Chilai, and Limbo, absolutely not, unless it's on the turn where they can get all their orbs. I'm uncertain about this character, because this is, again, another character who launches a bunch of attacks, but they're roughly around, like, the 10 million range. But they do crit, but, like, that doesn't matter. Unless you were able to flood them with support and get them above. Again, it's roughly 15.5 million with a crit. They are able to do it. Outside of that, I don't think so. Beast Gohan. I've seen Beast Gohan not be able to do damage. Most of the time, it's because he's in slot 1. He gets hit by the super. He lives it, but then he gets that devastating debuff by 30%. And then he's just not strong enough at that point onward. The Gammas, I feel like the Gammas potentially could. But again, this is a character who launches a bunch of additionals, but none of them are like 20 million or whatever. HL, MUI, and SSBE, these are two characters who can comfortably cross that damage threshold. This is a unit who, after he supers, his counters are able to, but his normal super attacks or his counters before supering are not able to cross the damage threshold. Jiren is a character who can. This is a character who I think potentially could at Rainbow status. But without being at Rainbow, I don't realistically think that they're going to be able to do damage. And Topo, with his guaranteed crits after his active skill, I feel like he could. So how many units could I say comfortably do damage? 1, 2, 3, 4? 4 units who've released this year can comfortably cross that threshold? Kefla, 5. 5 units who can comfortably cross the damage threshold. And then every other unit, it's either iffy or they just outright can't. Outright can't. Outright can't. Outright can't. Outright can't. Outright can't. And that's insane. That's a really, like, bizarre thing to think about. And obviously I know people have been able to beat this event. It's not unbeatable. This isn't like Broly level of difficulty or whatever. But the reason Broly was difficult because he was so strong and we didn't have units that were up to snuff. We have units that are up to snuff, but this fight just has bullshit mechanic after bullshit mechanic after bullshit mechanic with weird design choices. Again, you can blitz this phase. You can probably blitz this phase so that you might not have your dodge nullification ability activated. And then you get to hear, and this is like, oh, a skill check. No, this just means you can't use units. I dare anyone, literally anyone, if you can do it or if you've seen someone do it, I want to see a full Majin Power team. I want to see Fat Boo. I want to see Mr. Boo. I want to see Boo Tanks, Super Easy A Kid Boo. Go ahead and throw on this side banner unit and Tech Exchange Boo. Someone please show me that team, that exact team winning without items. Or if they do it, show me them doing it with before turn 30. Because like potentially, you know, Tech Easy A Super Boo, if you transform him into Exchange Boo, where is he at? I want to showcase what I'm trying to discuss here. He will be on this page. Let's see. Right here. I feel like potentially, if you transform into this guy, you could do it if you gave him 5 Rainbow Orbs. Because his attack stat is roughly like 21 million, or at least that's what mine is. Mine is not Rainbow, but that's around where he's at. But this is just objectively the inferior form. I feel like if you're using this character, you want to keep him in this form. Slightly weaker defensively, but like they have the more consistent damage reduction, and they have the dodge. You go into this form, and yeah, they have slightly higher start turn attack and defense, but they lose the dodge and they lose a little bit of their damage reduction in exchange for extra offense, and then they get a 25% chance to crit per Rainbow Key Sphere, which would be good for this fight, which would be good because they would be able to do consistent damage. The only problem is, where is the Rainbow Orb Changer on Boo Saga? It doesn't exist. Mr. Boo. But Mr. Boo needs his orbs. And he's not going to be doing damage to a fight like this, and he's not going to be able to debuff them either, so I would love to see that. But yeah, this is just a really annoying fight. How could they fix it? There's some very simple things you could do. Number one, add defense or HP to this fight. Make this fight take longer. Or make it more relevant. Like, literally anything. Like, why does this part of the fight even exist? It might as well not even exist. Start with 17, because this is such a nothing burger of a fight. I mean, yeah, doing an 1/8 of your damage at the start of turn could be scary if he did anything to capitalize on it. Are these the lowest normals we've seen this year? I mean, I feel maybe. Like, 400k is actually nothing anymore. And then we go into this phase, and again, it has two... How many bullshit mechanics does each phase have? I'm not counting this, because the fight can't capitalize on it. It's not like the Super Boo Red Zone, where he could actually capitalize on it. That doesn't matter. Not to mention you're, like, 1-phasing him, 2-phasing him. This fight has... Or this section, I guess, has 2 right here. This one, I would say, has 2. With the orb changing and this, and again having no counterplay, especially coming right after this fight is, or this section is way more annoying. And then we go down to here. This one has, I would say, again, 2 bullshit mechanics that players can't really play around. Being this threshold, which is just a check. This outright invalidates a lot of characters. This also invalidates characters who don't have rainbowed boxes. If you don't have a full rainbowed box, like, what are you gonna do with like your Rainbow Tech MUI, right? Rainbow Tech MUI. Rainbow Tech MUI, he's not able to do damage until after he supers and then gets a bunch of crit counters, right? We've seen footage of the True DT, who has a very offensively built unit right here, not be able to do damage. This is a brand new summonable unit, who he has rainbowed. I have him 55%. Is this kid's counters even going to be able to do damage? I don't know. There's a chance that when I waltz into this fight, you know, whenever it drops here in a few days, you know, I'm going to walk in all chipper, we'll be recording. I'll get to this phase and literally not a single unit on my team will be able to do damage. Is that fun? I don't think so. Like, I don't think a fight like this is inherently fun. I do like this mechanic, though. Doubling his attack, but halving his defense. I think that's a fun mechanic. I do. And I don't have a problem with dodge nullifying. And I don't have a problem with locking and sealing. I don't have a problem with all these things in a vacuum. But this is just a fight where it's back to back to back. That's just unfair. That's just unfair. Like, if we're looking, again, back to the 7th anniversary, stage 1 of Omega Shenron, he had that super devastating phase where it just out the gate, one character was getting locked, one character was getting sealed. I think he also orb changed, and there was no counterplay to that. You just had to, like, deal with it, and that was the hardest part of that fight. You got to the STR phase, yeah, he still had a very devastating super attack at the time, but he didn't really do anything special. And then you got to the final phase where it was a countdown super, and you just had 2 turns to kill him, because at the time he launched a 1.5, which was unlivable. So you had 2 turns to just kill him. So he had one bullshit phase, the rest of the fight was fine. You go to Fusion Zamasu, a fight that I think was very overhated. He had one bullshit phase where, like, yes, he had the AoEs at the start. He also had the damage check, but you got to the physical phase and you basically won. I don't think I ever lost in the physical phase. I'm so serious. Like, I don't think I ever lost. Just because you just get rolling by that point and you win. But why? There's 6 bullshit mechanics across 4 phases. I mean, potentially 7 if you want to count this. I wouldn't, but you could. It's just poorly designed. Or if you were going to have all these phases, add a buffer phase. Add just like another phase where like nothing happens, but it's just a hard-hitting boss. So maybe, again, to counterplay that, yeah, he locks this, but before you go into this, there's another phase where you can potentially fix your rotations. Or make this guy have slightly less HP. Get rid of this damage check. Could you imagine if this was the exact same fight just with this? And maybe you got rid of this part right here? So just when he was half HP, his attack got doubled? I think that would be fine. I think that would be fine. Again, all of these abilities in a vacuum I enjoy. Actually, again, I think that this is a fun little ability right here. And I think it's cheeky that they added this. Actually, no, I'm going to count this as a bullshit mechanic that you can't do anything about. If Beast Gohan struggles against something like this, then yeah, I think that's directly unfair. So yeah, global players in about a week's time. Be prepared. Get your Whis ready. Grind up as many Whis as you can. Get as many Ghost Ushers as you can. If you don't have Tech MUI, I'm afraid that you're going to probably have a much harder time than the rest of the community. But this is just a badly designed fight. I mean, I'm going to do it, and whenever I do it, I'm going to feel very proud of myself. Maybe once I dive in, I will feel slightly less annoyed. But like, I'm just thinking about all the fights within the last like few years that we've seen people complain about. Again, I always go back to Fusion Zamasu because even though I struggled with Fusion Zamasu, it took me several days to beat, and it took me nearly 7 months to get my first no item. Right? Like, I struggled with that all the time, but I didn't mind because you jumped in and you won or you lost, and that was fine in my opinion. My box just wasn't strong enough at the time, and I just had to maneuver my playing pieces correctly, and eventually I got it. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I don't think he was that bad. He had one toxic phase, and his toxic phase was really hard because, you know, he had his AoEs or whatever. Just doing 500k damage to a bunch of units who, at the time, couldn't cross that threshold, that's certainly scary. I agree, but I don't think that was like this ground-shaking, unbelievable, Amatsu, you're an idiot. I think people directly overreacted to that. I feel like that level of, like, feeling, that primal feeling where I'm like, dude, this fight is just bullshit. That's what I'm feeling. I didn't feel that when Zamasu dropped. I didn't feel that when Omega Shenron dropped. I didn't even really feel that when Broly dropped. I didn't. I knew he was hard, but I was having fun in that fight. I was, because yeah, he had one bullshit mechanic. I guess you could say 2. He had the dodge nullifying, so you couldn't dodge him, and he had that AoE super in the 3rd phase. Okay. That's how you work around it. You have to go slow at the start of the fight. You got to build up characters. But he also had units that just outright invalidated him, like Tech God Goku. Like, that was a unit who just outright made that guy a fraud. And then once we got introductions to more characters like Birdku, Vegeta and Trunks, and a lot of these other units, again, it just became easier as the year went along. But we're right now, we already had like the 9th anniversary. We've already had the Tanabata unit. Again, the Tanabata unit was like perfectly designed for a fight like this, which I think is annoying. I don't like when they do that. I don't like when they introduce a new mechanic on a boss or a unit, and then they create a unit around it. I think that's dumb. Because I really don't think... I think Tech MUI will be very good. I think he's going to age really well. But I don't really see a new difficult meta boss having this ability for a while. I really don't. I think that once per year we'll get one, because that was the record last year. I talked about this before. We had Broly, and then it wasn't until we got to Omega Shenron in the Shadow Dragon event last year that we got another difficult dodge nullifying boss. So I think it'll be a while before we see this ability again. And by the time that it does, we'll probably have a better option. But... oh, hello, Simone. Can you guys hear my cat? Simone. Yeah? Alright. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this fight. Let me know. Do you think I'm overhyping it? Do you think that it's potentially not that bad with the units that we have available to us? But like, again, this is the strongest our units have ever been. And people are still struggling. Like, I think that it's a little poorly designed. So how would I fix this fight? Okay, number 1, make this opening phase actually meaningful. Add a little bit to the damage here, and then add to the HP, and then maybe make this 90,000. Let's just do that. Okay, boom. This guy right here, I think he can stay as he is. I don't really have a problem with him. I think having his lower stats, but having 2 of these really toxic mechanics works. I would say either add a buffer phase, or make this guy slightly weaker defensively. I think that would be fine. Or maybe get rid of this so that you can be more consistent with your orbs. And then this guy right here, I would just say having all these abilities in the same fight is a problem. But let's just get rid of this. Keep the fight the exact same, double his HP, or double his attack, half his defense, get rid of this damage check, and then I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with that. But again, they didn't do that. There's just so many abilities back to back to back that's just not fun, that makes so many of these new units struggle in a way that's just kind of sucky, in my opinion. And, like, it's not much better from the JP perspective. Like, JP players are struggling to beat this fight. And if a JP player is struggling when they have characters like Jiren, and they're having characters like Cell Max on the Super Bosses team. Like, try running Super Bosses in here as a global player. Dude, Kefla and Goku Black, that rotation's about to go hard. But yep, let me know what you think. Let me know if I'm overreacting. I am excited to dive in. I am excited. I'm always excited when we get new events. And I'm going to go in with, like, the best possible attitude. But I just don't think we're ready. I don't think JP was ready. I just don't think we were. I think they, like, saw that we want difficult content. And I love more difficult content. But just all of these combined in the same fight certainly make for an interesting experience. Or at least, again, that's my initial reaction. I may dive in. I may love this fight. I don't know. I guess only time will tell, but I do just kind of want to, like, vent that I do think fundamentally it is poorly designed. Just because there's so many toxic abilities, and it feels like they don't, like, again, this opening phase might as well not exist. It doesn't. And then this, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking. Amatsu, what were you cooking? I don't know. I'm excited to dive in. Let me know if you're excited to dive in. Let me know if you're apprehensive or anything. But yeah, that is going to be all for this time, guys. I've been the Super 27. I'm a variety Twitch streamer and an up-and-coming PNG tuber trying to make it big in the world. I have a Twitter, a Twitch, a TikTok, and a YouTube. The links which can all be found in the description of this video. And while you're down there, don't forget to like, subscribe, share me around, and leave me a comment, positive, negative, or indifferent. I would love just any sort of interaction I can get from you guys. But that's going to be all for now. So, as always, I've been the Super 27, and I am signing off.